Hello, friends and artists. Mrs. Gordon here. I am so pleased to present to you your Artist of the Month for November, Faith Ringgold. Last month in October, we learned about the art of Yayoi Kusama, and this month we're learning about one of my favorites, Miss Faith Ringgold. She is a painter, a writer, a mixed media sculptor. That means she uses different kinds of materials and puts them together to sculpt them, and a performance artist. Faith Ringgold said, "I have always known that the way to get what you want is don't settle for less. I always knew I wanted to be an artist." Faith was born in Harlem, New York in 1930. She is best known for her narrative quilts. Those are quilts that tell a story. She wrote the children's book Tar Beach in 1993, right here. You've probably seen it in the library. See it? Her first job after college was teaching art. So I'm going to be reading to you from the book We Are Artists, and I'm reading to you the story. Here it is, Stitching History, Faith Ringgold. Faith Ringgold, Stitching History. They called it Tar Beach. It wasn't like any other beach you might imagine. It was a hard and black rooftop that gave off that warm and tacky smell of hot asphalt. Beyond was a noisy sea of skyscrapers, bridges, and apartment blocks, with waves of taxis and cars stop-starting at traffic lights far below. To Faith, that rooftop in Harlem, New York, was as magical as any beach in the world might be. It was a place for dreaming. Faith and the other children would lie on a mattress on warm summer nights and gaze across the glittering city to the lights of the George Washington Bridge, while their parents sat around the old green table playing cards. Up there, they felt invincible, like anything was possible. They would dream of flying, touching the stars that seemed to rain down around them. They could fly over any obstacle placed in their path. In the 1930s, America was gripped by the Great Depression, so there wasn't much food to go around. Times weren't easy. But there was always something going on at Faith's house. Her mom, Willie Posey, was a fashion designer, and Faith's dad, Andrew, was always telling stories. People came and went constantly, chatting over tea and scraps of fabric. Faith was curious and artistic and determined to make her mark, but she couldn't go to school that much because of her asthma, so she stayed at home with her mom and was always coloring or painting something. But she knew, even when she was little, that she wanted to go to college. She was fascinated by the boys who streamed up the steps from the local subway station. One day she followed them. They were all going to City College. "I want to go there one day," she told her mom, "and study art." "Then you shall," Willie replied. City College, Faith soon discovered, was just for boys, but she could always find a way around a challenge. After much persuasion, the principal eventually agreed that she could attend as the only girl in the college and study to be an art teacher. As Faith said, she was allowed to do art, but not to be an artist. Faith became an artist, of course, but it didn't matter how good an artist she was. She was both African American and a woman. For centuries, African American people had not had the same rights as white Americans. The civil rights movement had helped change this, and African American people were starting to be treated more fairly. But the art world was still dominated by white male artists. Faith heard that there was going to be a big art show at the famous Whitney Museum of American Art. But not a single African American artist was to be included. She was furious. She came up with a plan. Faith and her friends would go to the opening carrying whistles in their pockets and blow them whenever the gallery staff weren't looking. They spread out, and soon the gallery was deafened with the sound of whistles. Oh, it made the curators mad. They couldn't work out who was making the noise. The protest worked. Well, in part. Some African American artists were invited in to meet with the curators, but only the men. The women were left outside. Clearly, it would take longer for women artists to be seen. Faith's art was powerful, the in-your-face kind of art, but no one was interested in buying challenging art in those days. What is it, she kept asking, that makes women's art different from men's? Then one day she realized that she had always been surrounded by forms of women's art. Quilting and needlework had been a huge part of the lives of the women in her family, right back to her great 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 grandmother, who, as a slave, had created quilts to keep her own family warm. Knowledge and tradition had been passed down from mother to daughter, and now it was her turn. With her mother's help, Faith created her first art quilt. After that, she created more and more. Quilting, Faith realized, was a link to the women of her past and a way to create a new form of art. It was also a way to create paintings as large as she wanted and still be able to show them in galleries all over America. All she had to do was roll them up. She could take a whole exhibition in a single trunk. And you know what? Those people who hadn't looked twice at her first paintings began to take notice. Somehow, the language of the quilt made it acceptable to be political. 50 years after the whistleblowing protest, the Whitney Museum finally bought one of Faith's prints for their collection. Other great galleries and museums have her quilts too. Her artworks hang in some of the homes of presidents, and her mosaics, like this one, line the walls of the subway station in New York City. Faith has always wanted to change things. Not only has she created a new language in art, but she has written many children's books and started a foundation called Anyone Can Fly, which is devoted to teaching children and adults about African American masters of art. Her organization, called Where We At, encouraged other Black women to find their own artistic voices too. You can't sit around waiting for somebody else to say who you are, she said. You need to write it and paint it and do it. That's where the art comes from. It's a visual image of who you are. That's the power of being an artist. So let's take a look at some of Faith Ringgold's work. These are some of her quilts. These are different kinds of quilts inspired by tankas. But you'll see here the geometric shapes and the beautiful pictures. They're very reminiscent of quilts. This is one of her story quilts where she's included pictures that helps tell a story. I like how the border of this quilt looks like music to me. Another one of her story quilts, you can see the geometric border and the pictures inside. These are some of her soft sculpture creations that she's made. This one is over 7 feet tall. But probably my favorite piece is Tar Beach. And I love the different kinds of patterns and the pictures and the person flying over the bridge. Later this month, you'll get a reading of Tar Beach. You'll get to hear Faith Ringgold read her story of Tar Beach. Friends and artists, I am so very excited to show you the work of Faith Ringgold this month and to help you understand her work better by creating projects inspired by her. We will be telling our stories. We will be drawing these stories in pictures. We will be making different ideas, making different pieces of art inspired by quilts and different ideas. And I am just so very excited to have you learn more about the fabulous art of Miss Faith Ringgold. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to make more art with you this month, inspired by November's Artist of the Month, Faith Ringgold. Happy art making, friends.